What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and welcome back for another budget brew breakdown where we build bangers without breaking the bank. Today we've got a really sweet one that I'm super excited about. This is Ivy, Card Draw Queen, on a budget, $60 to be exact. AKA Ivy Gleeful Spellthief, if you've never seen him before. She's 2-drop for a green and a blue, 2/1 flyer that says, whenever a player casts a spell that targets only a single creature other than Ivy Gleeful Spellthief, you may copy that spell. The copy targets Ivy. So the main things that we're going to be copying here are instants, sorceries, and auras. All of which pack a punch in this Ivy build, and we're going to go through that all in a sec. If you like budget brews like this one, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more in the future, and leave a comment below. Let me know if there's any particular commanders you think I should look into that would be good candidates for budget brew breakdown. Alright, without further ado, let's start going through the deck and see how we're getting it done. So I mentioned I was really excited about this deck, and that was not a lie. I actually built this deck in paper and made it out of the brew stage and into a deck box and sleeves and all that. Still got a few things to unproxy yet, but nonetheless, I've been having a blast with it. I've actually gotten some paper games in with her. But yes, I call her Ivy Card Draw Queen because this deck draws an obscene amount of cards. And it has a really consistent game plan. Obviously, you know, if you're drawing tons of cards, that builds in consistency in and of itself. But I'm a big fan of decks with lots of redundancy and consistent game plans. So with Ivy, it's pretty simple. Step one for the deck is we are playing a ton of 1-drops to get down before Ivy and eventually maximize her own ability. In particular, we're playing mostly these evasive 1-drops, and we'll get to why on that in just a minute. But lots of 1/1s for 1. You know, 1/1 flyers with a little extra gravy on top, whatever other effect is cool by us. But mainly we're just interested in these 1-drop evasive creatures that can hold aura as well. So yeah, anything that's unblockable, anything that's flying, it all plays here, and we are running what looks like 15 1-drops in the current build, almost all of which are, you know, evasive in some way and have maybe some extra interesting abilities on top, like Siren Storm Tamer can double as some protection that we'll go over later. Maybe flash on the creature like Ilvoid Galeblade or Spectral Sailor. Mausoleum Wanderer, kind of a similar boat as Siren Storm Tamer, but all of these, their main goal is to come down on turn 1 and have an evasive body for us to tag team it with Ivy. So then, after we've developed a 1-drop on turn 1, the next thing we're really looking for, aside from obviously 2 lands to cast Ivy on turn 2, is some card draw. And I'd say some of the best card draw we can start the game off with is curiosity effects. This is one of the reasons why all of our 1-drops we want to be evasive, so they can hold the curiosity effects really well. And just as a, just to go over quick again, if you need to read it again, Ivy Gleeful Spellthief says, whenever a player casts a spell that targets only a creature other than Ivy, you may copy that spell. So first and foremost, curiosity effects copied starting on turn 3 most likely is really going to get the engine humming and get the cards flowing. This is, immediately nets us 2 cards on, turn 3, unless we get interacted with early. But yeah, we're always happy to see some of these curiosity effects to double up on them, one on our evasive 1-drop, one on Ivy, and start collecting cards right off the bat. If we didn't find one of these curiosity effects in our opening hand, that's okay. We have other ways to draw cards. How, you may ask? I'm glad you asked. We're playing 14 1-mana draw 2 effects in this deck. I mentioned we can copy, we get to copy instants and sorceries with Ivy too. Anything that targets just a singular creature, we have the ability to copy. So we have a ton of 1-mana cards that target a single creature that happen to say draw a card on them. A lot of times, a lot of these effects, the extra text is just that, and kind of extra text, even flavor text sometimes. But the main thing that we're interested in this build is the fact that they cost 1 mana and they draw us a card, or 2 cards to be more specific, hence the section being called 1-mana draw 2. So this, combined with the curiosity effects that we just talked about, is really giving the deck its namesake in Ivy Card Draw Queen. It's not hard at all to look at an opening hand and see a couple lands, an evasive 1-drop, and either some curiosity effects or some 1-mana draw 2s. And we don't mind if it's on an instant or a sorcery or even an aura, like Frog Tongue. When it comes into play, draw a card, and of course you get the aura copied onto both creatures, so you draw 2. Enchanted creature can block creatures with flying. Awesome, yeah, I mean, great. We're mostly, again, interested in the draw effects, but quick shout out to some awesome Phil Foglio art there. But yeah, so we're running almost the most amount of these we can run. There's a few others in the game, but 14 of them in total. A charge through, gives trample, draws a card. There are a couple auras, like I mentioned, that when they enter, they draw a card themselves, and that can be relevant for reasons I'll explain later, being on an aura versus an instant sorcery. But yeah, and then we do have stuff that can actually definitely help us punch through as well, like Shadow Rift and Slip Through Space. The extra text on that is definitely not irrelevant if we're facing down armies of flyers. This can give us an extra way to evade through the defenses and get through. But mainly these are here to get our engine humming and start ripping through the deck and drawing lots of cards to find some of the other stuff that we're looking for. And I would say probably one of the next things we're really looking for is some way to protect our game plan. We run lots of protection spells. And I would say the main ones that I'd be looking for to be drawing down to would be these 1 mana protection spells that are really pull a lot of weight in this deck, since we get to copy them to both of our creatures that we have out. Typically this deck is probably going to end up only having 2 creatures out at a time, maybe more, but these 1 mana protection spells that, let's say like Defend the Rider, for example, target permanent you control gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Copies over to both creatures and can save them from a board wipe. It can save them from spot removal. Anything that's getting pointed their way it's just really, really efficient way to protect the game plan and, keep the cards humming and all that. So we're running several of those effects. Tyvar Stand is very similar. It can also provide a large buff in a pinch. Tameo Safekeeping, pretty classic at this point, almost the exact same as Defend the Rider. Vines of Vastwood can give us a buff in a pinch, but really, again, we're just really happy with these very efficient 1 mana, protection spells. Because if you haven't noticed already, or if you didn't see my post from yesterday, here's just a quick look at the mana curve if it wasn't apparent already. This is a very lean and mean build, very low to the ground. We are running 34 lands in the deck, and you can see why. This deck is just, the entire backbone of it is 1-drops, whether it's evasive 1-drop creatures or 1 mana draw 2 spells, etc. Very lean and mean. But yeah, so there are some other protection spells as well that I've listed in here. But yeah, lots of ways. We're definitely looking to draw into this, I would say, after we get some of our early game setup going, our creatures attacking, card draw humming. We're definitely going to be looking for ways to protect our game plan, because I think this deck is going to be painting a target on its back pretty quick since it hits the ground running so quick. The next thing I'd say the deck is looking for is trying to draw down to some of its big buff spells. Once it's established some creatures and started churning through the deck with tons of card draw and found some protection spells to, really lean into the creatures, we are looking for some big buffs. I would say some of the best ones I'll highlight first. Ancestral Mask goes absolutely crazy in this deck. Getting to copy it to both creatures, and it says enchanted creature gets +2/+2 for each other enchantment in play. Which again gets ridiculous when we're copying a ton of these, very cheap enchantments like Rancor or some of the other 1 mana draw 2 cards that we talked about earlier that come attached to auras. Ancestral Mask gets out of hand real quick. Similarly, this might take the cake for my favorite card in the deck right now, Nerd Rage. It's a 3 mana enchantment aura from the Fallout set. When it enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards, and for us that's going to end up being draw 4 cards in total when it gets copied. And it says, enchanted creature you have no maximum hand size, and whenever this creature attacks, if you have 10 or more cards in hand, it gets +10/+10 until end of turn. So this can happen, I think, as early as turn 4 in the deck. Maybe there's a turn 3 Magical Christmas land, but this can happen quicker than our opponents would like to think. And this deck is, again, amazing at drawing cards and keeping the hand full. And, Nerd Rage comes down immediately and draws 4 cards and often gets you up to that 10-card threshold. So this card packs an absolute punch in this deck. Other big buff spells we can talk about. Strong Back does a pretty similar impression to Ancestral Mask, another +2/+2 for each aura and equipment attached to it kind of thing. So that's another one of our good buff spells. Octopus Umbra definitely kind of pulls double duty in this deck. It gives a enchanted creature a base power and toughness of 8/8, and whenever the creature attacks, you can tap down a creature with power 8 or less, which is nice, sure. But when I say double duty, I mean it pulls some weight as protection as well with the totem armor. We've got a few instances of totem armor in the deck, and we're not at all upset about that. You know, we're pretty good at protecting against some of these spot removals coming our way. Totem armor gives us another layer to protect against board wipes. Another powerful thing this deck gets to do is it gets to copy mutate spells. Interesting interaction for sure, but these can definitely help buff up our board as well as provide some other effects as well. But yeah, we get to copy some of these mutate creatures like Sawtusk Demolisher, who can mutate for 4 mana total, and it turns the creature into a 6/6 trample amongst other things. And then it says, whenever this creature mutates, destroy target non-creature permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green beast creature token. So, talking about double duty from earlier, Sawtusk Demolisher definitely has a claim on that as well. It's in our big buff section for a reason. It adds a ton of power and toughness to the board and synergizes with some of the other buffs on top. And then it can also remove some pesky permanents out of the way. In a similar vein, Gemrazor is the other mutator we're currently running, who himself, he mutates for just 3 mana total, so you can actually get him going as soon as turn 3. Once you've developed a 1-drop in Ivy, and he mutates for 3 mana, turns the creature into a 4/4 base power toughness with reach and trample, and then it says whenever this creature mutates, destroy target artifact or an enchantment an opponent controls. And again, just as a reminder, we're doubling up on all of this, so we're turning 2 creatures into bigger versions of themselves, and we're getting double dipping on the whenever this creature mutates effects. So all these cards are going to be pulling weight on buffing up the board. Timber Paladin is kind of an interesting case one here. He holds auras particularly well. He's kind of levels up as he collects more auras, and he goes from a 1/1 to a 3/3 to a 5/5 vigilant into, as long as he has 3 or more auras, he's got base power and toughness 10/10, vigilance, and trample. So he's another way to go big, and we're not upset to see him. Elusive Otter is kind of a again, talking about double duty creatures, he can be our 1-drop for turn on turn 1 if we need him to be. He's got prowess and his own method of evasion, but he can also actually in a pinch be a late game buff for our creatures and just throw a bunch of 1/1 counters on one target creature and then have that copied over to Ivy. Next, we do have some mana acceleration in the deck. Despite being as low to the ground as it is and just chock full of 1-drops, we do have a few cards to kind of help accelerate our mana situation. And it's definitely an interesting question on how much of this we should even run. But here, I'll go over what we're running currently. Arguably one of the best ones that synergizes amazing with Ivy is Scale the Heights. It says it's a 3 mana sorcery. Put a 1/1 counter up to 1 target creature. You gain 2 life. You may play an additional land this turn and draw a card. So for 3 mana, it effectively draws us 2 cards, lets us play 2 additional lands, and buffs up both creatures that it ends up targeting. So extra land drops is amazing in this deck since we're drawing so many cards. Even though we're only running 34 lands, we do end up seeing a lot of extra lands, so anything that helps us play extra lands is fantastic. In a similar vein, we have Enter the Unknown. Target creature you control explores, and then you may play an additional land this turn. So this, can end up netting us positive mana since it's 1 mana and ends up letting us play 2 additional lands after it gets copied. And we're running just a couple other things. Wild Growth can come down on turn 1 and accelerate our game plan even a little bit from there. One with Nature is fantastic. Kind of does a similar impression to a Curiosity effect, but instead it rampant growths us. So if we're able to slap that down in a couple creatures early, that is really going to help advance our game plan and help get some extra mana to spend the cards that we're drawing. Druid's Repository is also currently in here. I'm still not positive on how strong it is, but we can get that down on turn 3 as soon as we already have 2 creatures going, and should start charging up from there and netting us basically treasure tokens is what it feels like. But there are a couple other cards I was considering for mana acceleration that you guys will have to tell me what you think of and see if let me know in the comments below if you think there's any particular cards I could cut for these, because I'm kind of on the fence about what I could cut for these. But Migratory Greathorn is another mutator that rampant growths when you mutate the creature, so this would rampant growth as 2 lands. On the Trail is interesting too. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. So I can see that going pretty crazy with how many instances of draw 2 Ivy can produce. And similarly, Composer of Spring, whenever enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. If you control 6 or more enchantments, you can do it with a creature as well, but we're not that interested in that. Just so every time we copy an aura, we get 2 instances of, you may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. So let me know if you see any good spots or good things to cut for those cards and give them a shot, because I think for how many cards the deck draws, it's definitely interested in trying to slot in at least a couple extra ways to ramp out our mana situation. And rounding out the list, we've just got kind of some odds and ends. We got some other card draw or things that help us gain some extra value, like Storm Chaser Drake. Can let us, draw even more cards when he's getting targeted. Similarly, Season of Growth, whenever you cast a spell that targets a creature you control, draw cards. So this can even amplify our already amazing card draw. Trash the Town can, in one combat, give 1 instance of, basically draw 4 cards. With that last ability, you give target creature draw 2 cards when it connects. So, and then Shielding Plaques, it's card draw and protection in 1. And then we are running a decent little suite of removal and counter spells. It doesn't go over the top. This deck is definitely more proactive than reactive, but still dialing in the numbers, so gotta see what feels right. But here's what we're running currently. And again, just very efficient, removal and counter spells where we can. So Into the Floodmaw can kind of bounce anything in a pinch. Rapid Hybridization for some efficient creature removal. We already talked about a couple ways in that we can remove artifacts and enchantments in Gem Razor and Sawtusk Demolisher. Beast Within, you gotta love it. It just has a catch-all answer. I mean, whatever you need to deal with, it's there. So that recently came into the deck. And yeah, you might think for how many cards we're drawing and being a blue deck that we'd be running more counter spells, but we're not. We're just running a couple to keep our opponents on our toes and hopefully help, protect our very proactive game plan and maybe stop a very dangerous thing in a pinch. And as I mentioned, 34 lands, all untapped. This deck is really trying to curve out, which I love. So a bit of the budget did go into the lands, nothing crazy. But yeah, all untapped lands, because this deck is really trying to curve out. Again, as soon as turn 1, we're trying to go 1, 2, 3, etc. And then last couple cards didn't quite fit into any of the categories before. Invisible Stalker is a classic from Innistrad, hexproof and unblockable, so hard to deal with. And then Notorious Throng is awesome in this deck. It's an older one that says create X 1/1 Black Fairy Rogue creature tokens with flying, where X is the damage dealt to your opponents this turn. And if this spell's prowl cost was paid, which we can pay as long as we've dealt damage to an opponent with Ivy because she is a rogue, you can take an extra turn after this one. So yeah, 3 in a blue for the normal cost, I should say. 5 in a blue for the prowl cost. So if we ever get to that point with Ivy and a creature buffed up to any level, we're gonna spit out a huge fairy army and take an extra turn. That should be good night. All right, so now that we've gone through most of the deck, I'm just gonna do a quick run through kind of where some of the budget went. You can see under the big buff section, Octopus Umbra and Sawtusk Demolisher, both are, a little bit, but I think super worth it. Both are heavy hitters in this build. None of our 1-drop evasive creatures ate up much of our budget at all. That was a nice thing that really helped this deck be the budget brew that it is, since these 1-drop creatures are such a backbone of the deck and they don't eat up much of the budget. We did have some of the budget spent into the lands, like I mentioned, $16 total, so that really helps us, curve out consistently and make sure that, we're always casting our spells on time. Really important in this deck. And besides there, just some odds and ends, in the protection category, Tameo Safekeeping is $3, but super worth it. All of these 1 mana protection spells are super important for the deck and making sure that, we have a, strong backbone to our game plan. But yeah, I mean, again, nothing crazy here. Some of the removal, Into the Floodmaw, 309 right now, not super crazy. A couple of the curiosity effects like Keen Sense, but again, you can make this deck cheaper if you wanted to, but at $60 felt like a good, healthy point for the deck to reside at. And yeah, let's take a look through a sample hand, see how the deck plays out. Alright guys, so here's a sample opening hand that we'd be super happy to keep. Again, when we're mulliganing for our opening hands in this deck, we're looking for 1-drops. We've run plenty of them in the deck, so we can afford to hard mulligan for them. That's part of the redundancy and consistency built into this deck, which again is something I'm huge on and what I love in budget brews. So we're going to mulligan aggressively for a hand with some type of 1-drop to get the party started early. Of course, enough lands, which for us is 2 really, enough to cast a 1-drop, and then Ivy on turn 2. So we got that box checked here, and then some type of card draw, which this hand has got multiple forms of. We got a Curiosity, the original Curiosity itself here, and one of our 1-mana draw 2 cards, and looks like we've got a piece of removal to boot. But this is a fantastic opener. Let's see how it plays out. Turn 1, flip that over to a blue, get down an Evasive 1-drop. Turn 2, play our forest. And of course, cast Ms. Ivy, the card draw queen herself. Beat him for 1. Turn 3. Alright. We're getting our 3rd land drop down, and I think we're trying to develop our Curiosity effect here. It's really, really important to get these down early so you can start, getting the card draw engine chugging, and they're a big part of it for sure. So we get to copy a Curiosity, targeting Harrier Strix, and then it recopies over to Ivy. And I think first we just get into the red zone with our creatures and draw our 2 cards off of our Curiosity effects for the combat. So draw 2 cards here, see what we get. Okay. We did find a protection spell along the way, so I think we could, we could afford to, at the end step before we untap on our next turn, potentially cast one of our instant speed 1-mana draw 2 effects. Looks like we have Twisted Image here if we wanted to cast that, or we have Leap that we could use, whichever we care less about, I suppose. We could, of course, cast another 1-mana Evasive 1-drop, but I don't think that's really necessary right now. So let's just say on the end step before we untap for our next turn, we cast a Twisted Image to, targeting a creature, copy it to Ivy, and draw 2 cards. Because then our turn 4, we've got the nuts here. This is, really one of the best things you can do to be popping off in this deck. 3 mana, cast Nerd Rage. Onto Carrier Strix, copy it over to Ivy, draw 4 cards, and then get into the red zone with both these creatures. And since you have 10 or more cards in your hand, Nerd Rage says the creature gets +10/+10 when it attacks. So this is definitely an incredible opening. And yeah, this is definitely going to be getting it done. We even have a protection spell to back up the game plan here. But, even if you don't get the magical Christmas land, this deck, it does its thing really consistently. It gets the it gets the 1-drops down on turn 1, Ivy on turn 2, and it gets the cards flowing on turn 3. So whether you open into what you need or you have to start digging for it, it finds what it's looking for really consistently. And no 2 games are different because it doesn't run any tutors, it just runs a lot of card draw. So I hope you like this Budget Brew breakdown. I've had a blast piloting this deck so far, and I think it still definitely needs some fine tuning, but I've been enjoying it a lot so far. So let me know what you think of Ivy, the card draw queen, and give the video a like if you enjoyed the breakdown, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more, and again, comment if you have any commander requests for future videos. I will definitely be taking a look at them, and I'll hope to see you in the next one.